Let's start with a meditation. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. And relaxing more deeply with each out-breath. And setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation. Allowing it to come to rest in the present moment. And simply becoming aware of the sensations of the breath. We all want to be happy, and we all want to be free of suffering. And it often seems to us as if the source of our happiness and the source of our suffering is out there in the world. And as a result, one of the main methods we often use to try to find happiness and overcome suffering is that we try to manipulate the things around us. We try to attract people, places and things that seem to be the source of our happiness. And we try to push away or avoid people, places and things that seem to be the source of our suffering. However, is this an effective strategy? Using this strategy, are we getting any closer to finding genuine happiness? And any closer to overcoming suffering? No matter how hard we try to manipulate and control the things around us, we still seem to encounter suffering. And we're still chasing after that elusive happiness. All that we're really achieving by using this approach is that we are trapping ourselves in the hope-fear cycle. Hoping for pleasant experiences and fearing or worrying about unpleasant experiences. And if we don't get the things we want, we often become frustrated. And even if we do get the things we want, they never really fully satisfy us, and we simply end up craving for more. And we often end up with a lot of dissatisfaction and disappointment when things don't live up to our expectations. So what's the solution? According to Buddhism, we're simply looking in the wrong place. What would happen if we instead turned our attention to our own mind? What would happen if we began to cultivate more mindfulness, to cultivate a more calm, clear and focused mind? And what would happen if we could begin to see things more clearly and accurately, without projecting or distorting what we apprehend? And instead of reacting to things out of old habits, we could begin to respond in ways that are more conducive to our own and others' happiness. And what would happen if we begin to reduce and eliminate our mental afflictions, such as craving and attachment, anger and jealousy, fear and anxiety, and so forth? And we began to cultivate loving kindness and compassion for ourselves and others. And what would happen if we could begin to see difficult situations in our life not as problems or obstacles, but as opportunities for growth and development? So let's set a positive motivation. A motivation wishing to discover practical methods to overcome our mental afflictions and suffering, and to find genuine happiness and well-being. And we can expand that motivation out to include others. Also wishing to help those around us to overcome mental afflictions and suffering and find that well-being. And we can dedicate all of our efforts here in this retreat to that goal. The goal of overcoming everyone's mental afflictions and suffering and achieving genuine happiness and well-being. What I'd like to do this evening for this evening's topic is have a look at this three vehicles chart. And this covers some of the things that we've been looking at in this retreat. So we said that the foundation of the teachings that the Buddha gave was the Four Noble Truths. This is the first teaching he gave, and this is the foundation of all Buddhist traditions. And this is the foundation of what's called the Theravada vehicle. So when Buddhism spread originally from India, it spread through the Pali language into Sri Lanka and then up through Southeast Asia. So those Buddhist traditions now collectively called the Theravada Buddhist traditions, and the original texts they use written in the Pali language. And so there, based on the Four Noble Truths, the goal of the spiritual path, of course, is nirvana. This state of liberation from suffering and its causes. Someone who's achieved this goal of nirvana is called an arhat. An arhat, often translated in English as like foe destroyer, meaning someone who's destroyed the enemy. And of course the enemy here is the mental afflictions. And we saw here that to cultivate the aspiration for nirvana, that's called renunciation. But again, this is not a very good translation because the original term there in Sanskrit is nisarana, which literally means to move out of, away from suffering. So it's the aspiration for liberation from suffering. And then, of course, to strive for this goal of nirvana, the practices here normally presented here as the Noble Eightfold Path. And those 8 practices that we see there can be condensed into these 3 core practices, these 3 higher trainings of ethics, concentration and wisdom. And of course here in the Four Noble Truths, this wisdom is these 3 marks of existence, Vipashyana practice, of impermanence, suffering, no self. In particular, this wisdom of no self is what enables us to move along the path to the goal of nirvana. So this is the Theravada vehicle based on the Four Noble Truths. But then also we saw in this retreat that the Buddha taught these perfection of wisdom teachings. And it's these teachings that really, when they spread from India through the Sanskrit language, over the Himalayas onto the Silk Route, into China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and get over the Himalayas into Tibet, these Buddhist traditions are collectively now called Mahayana Buddhist traditions. And they are based on the text written in the Sanskrit language, so they go back to those texts. And so we saw here in the Mahayana that the final goal of the spiritual path is one step further, is enlightenment. And so someone who's achieved that goal, of course, is called Buddha. Buddha literally means fully awakened. And again, we saw there earlier that to strive for the goal of enlightenment, the aspiration we need to develop is this aspiration of bodhicitta. So again, chitta means mind, body means enlightenment, so it's literally the mind of enlightenment. The mind which aspires to enlightenment for the benefit of others. And when we cultivate that bodhicitta, we become what's called a bodhisattva. Again, bodhi is enlightenment. Sattva here means courage or strength. So a bodhisattva is someone who has the courage or strength to strive for enlightenment. So when the bodhisattva achieves enlightenment, they become Buddha. How to achieve the goal of enlightenment? What are the practices? Here, 6 perfections we see listed here. These practices of generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, wisdom. But also these 6 perfections can be condensed to the same 3 core areas of practice. Because generosity, ethics and patience can be condensed as ethics. And then we have concentration and wisdom. And then joyous effort is something we need to apply to all 3. So also here in the Mahayana, we have the 3 higher trainings, the core practices. But of course here, when we talk about the wisdom practice in the Theravada vehicle, the wisdom practice here was this wisdom of no self. Whereas here, when we talk about the Vipashyana or wisdom practice, we're talking about the wisdom of emptiness. And so then if we engage in this wisdom practice of emptiness on the basis of bodhicitta, we can achieve the goal of enlightenment. But then also we see here, and which we haven't really talked about so far, is Vipashyana. Sometimes simply called Tantra. So in Vipashyana, we have, like Mahayana, the goal is enlightenment. we cultivate bodhicitta, and in terms of wisdom, we have the same wisdom of emptiness. So what's the difference between Mahayana and Vajrayana? The difference is the level of mind that we're trying to access. So remember, we saw that in both Theravada and Mahayana, when we're doing the Shamatha or concentration practice, we're gaining access to the subtle level of mind. And we're using that in our Vipashyana practice of no self or Vipashyana practice of emptiness. Whereas in Tantra or Vajrayana, we're gaining access to the very subtle mind. And we gain access to that through these two practices here called the two stages. Generation stage and completion stage. And I'll explain them a little bit more shortly. One of the differences also between Theravada, Mahayana and Vajrayana is that both Theravada and Mahayana are what's called causal vehicles. Meaning, in both those, we have looking at the spiritual path from the perspective of the cause. Where here, there's the goal of enlightenment and nirvana. These are the practices that we need to do to create the causes to achieve that goal ahead of us. So both of those are looking forward on the spiritual path. So they're called causal vehicles. Tantra or Vajrayana is called resultant vehicle. Because it's looking at the path from the perspective of the result. Meaning in Tantra or Vajrayana, we're doing the practices from the perspective of the enlightened state. And we see this approach used a little bit in sport sometimes. Sometimes in sport we see the person imagining them doing their routine and having accomplished the result, and then they do their activity. And it's a very powerful way of accomplishing the result. So similarly here, we are doing our activity, the practice, from the perspective of the enlightened state. So what we do here in the generation stage is often a practice, we follow a practice manual called a sadhana. And what we are doing is we are visualizing ourselves as a certain what's called deity, a certain Buddha form, enlightened form. And then we're doing that whole practice on that basis, which involves often chanting some mantras, doing certain visualizations and so forth. So of course, to be able to do this, we need a basis. In fact, to be able to practice this effectively, it's said we need three things. We need renunciation, we need bodhicitta, and we need this wisdom of emptiness.